I want to be honest with you. I have been outed by Winston Sterzel.
I'm in contact with a guy who um, used to be an enemy,
Yeah, Winston Sterzel and we came to terms.
somebody who really couldn't stand my guts, went out of his way to try and sabotage me back in the day, sabotage my reputation. And he reached out privately um, about a year back.
Yeah, you know me. I've been away from China for quite some time, and I thought maybe I should reach out to Winston and talk to him about a few things.
He apologized and he was like, "You were right, about how things are here in China."
If you know me, you know I'm being sarcastic. What I'm kind of interested in talking about today is the same episode that I talked about yesterday. It was quite a long live stream, and it was covering a lot of different topics. But he posted in this video that he had talked to an old friend.
The guy is an American, and although he's very pro-China, he's also very pro-America, and the two things clashed, where you could no longer be pro-China if you were pro-American. Pro-China, you have to be anti-American. That's just the way it is.
I had a few people message me and say, "Hey, is he talking about you? Did you have a turn? Are you going to make the turn to slander?" The first story that he told couldn't have been me, because he was talking about a trip to Chongqing a year ago, about a guy who had gone, and he was making a video in Chongqing, and he was talking about green spaces and how China has some beautiful parks.
And so he was invited to do a live stream with one of these big guys, these big guys that are involved in the whole Chongqing propaganda and so on. These live streams where they bring guests on and they talk about how much better China is than America, basically. They always have some reason. Okay, so China's busy building a bunch of green spaces, parks and so on in some cities. The host, who's well known to both of us, was badgering him about the green spaces, saying, "See how amazing China's green spaces are. America doesn't have anything like that, right?" He pushed back and said, "You know what? That's not true. America has lots of green spaces. And, we've been developing a lot of good green spaces. In fact, in my hometown, etc., here and there, America actually does have incredibly good parks, far better than in China."
I'm in China right now. This is my apartment in China. Actually, Annie and Eva are staying here. Eva's my daughter, and she's going to school here for 6 months. And so they've rented this apartment for a great price. Watch my other channel, Jayo. I'm going to share how much we spent on this apartment. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath, great balcony, great view, furniture included, less than 6 months, so month by month. And it's an amazing deal if you're curious about how much value and bang for your buck you can get here. So I wasn't here during the period of time he talks about his friend, his American friend, who called him and told him that he was right, which is exactly what he likes to hear all over the place. I mean, I think you woke up with a smile on your face saying, "Yes, another one of those China shills said I was right. All along, I know it." I argue that that might not even exist, that story. But anyways, he was talking about how this guy went to Chongqing and he was making a video about green spaces, and that the person that was interviewing him in Chongqing, tried to press him on the fact that American green spaces are so much better than Chinese green spaces. And that he said, "No, America has some amazing parks and you're wrong. And no, China's parks aren't better than America's parks or green spaces."
And because of that, the episode that they filmed never aired.
And then that was proof that Winston was right. I don't know that I'm guessing first off that story doesn't exist at all, that's completely contrived. I would also argue that if you're making a video for the board of tourism or some sort of tourist entity in a city, and it's about green spaces in China, you probably don't want to be like promoting and putting in the video one of the people saying, "No, it's not, and America's better." Even you could probably get away with saying that, China's green spaces are on par with America's green spaces. But he was basically saying they didn't include what he said about China's green spaces, and therefore Winston is right. And this person had to literally reach out and be like, "Hey, Winston, hey, man, I'll tell you what. All along, buddy, all along you were right. China sucks." And it's all the CCP's fault. It's always a running gag for them to say that anything positive in China that's promoted strongly, is a CCP connected thing. If there's a park that's nice, that's CCP propaganda. If there's a city that's beautiful, it's CC. If there's a building with all these Christmas lights, I'll tell you what, you've been to a city in China that's lit up at night. They're not just in Shenzhen, they're all over China. It's not Christmas lights. I mean, these are amazing and they're worthy of praise. Like, it's worthy of saying these things are great. In their opinion, if you say anything positive about China, it's not China, it's the CCP. And it's a very shrewd way to go about it, because by labeling everything positive, wow, this train goes fast, CCP shill. Wow, this city is beautiful at night, CCP shill. Wow, there's not a lot of like homeless or vagrants in my neighborhood at night. There were a while ago, CCP shill. Wow, food prices are cheap, CCP shill. It's so inexpensive to travel here, CCP shill. You know, so they're able to make it so that if you literally say anything positive about China, they can say that is, one, CCP shill saying it, and two, because it is, don't listen to what they're saying because they don't know what they're saying. It's quite interesting. His other story about a friend that contacted him is even more apropos.
There's another one which I'll talk about in the future sometime, but there was a guy who really did a lot of damage to my reputation.
That really did some damage to his reputation. Yeah, yeah. You know, a lot of these channels that talk negative or objective, I consider myself objective. They are pretty negative towards him, because I think being objective means that you're being negative towards him. And that says more about him than it does about the people talking about him. Maybe he could take a look in the mirror. If you're going to ruin his reputation by saying positive and interesting insights about your life in China, then quite possible that you need to take a look at your reputation.
And he reached out not that long ago to apologize and, you know, to tell me, you know, so I was wrong and I had my reasons.
So he apologized and said, and Matthew Tai likes to say that you're right.
To tell me, you know,
that you're right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything that you've ever said, Winston, is true. First off, Winston and Matt both lived in China for like 15 years. If I lived in a place for 15 years and felt the way they feel about this place, China, man, you guys are masochists. I mean, you are like full-on S&M sadists. You must like cut yourself just to feel how nice it does to bleed, you know? I lived in China for 17 years, basically. I've been to China over 20 years. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't be here. If I didn't enjoy the people and the places and seeing the progress and seeing the beauty of the place, I wouldn't have stayed. Yet they did, because they have such large channels and because they focus on the negative of China, everything negative, and because they have this like strong, passionate negativity, they are the people that used to pop up in the search results when you look for China content. So people used to think that this is probably the prevailing opinion of people who spend time in China. Let me challenge you on that. Now, I'm a pretty positive guy on China. I'm a pretty positive guy in general. I look at the positive sides of most things. So I might be on the spectrum to one side that says China is a really nice place and a wonderful place. Winston and Matt are on another side, the darker side. They're looking at everything from a nefarious point of view. But if you were to watch their content, that must be how people feel when they live in China, as long as they did, and have an open mind. I would like to present to you this. I have met thousands of expatriates who lived in China for an extended period of time. They maybe have family here, they maybe are teaching, they maybe are engineers or professionals in the industrial side of China. Expats living in rural parts of China, and they're expats living on the coast. They're in the interior of China, they're on the exterior of China. We all talk, right? We all talk about our lives in China, how we feel about different things in China. We talk about the negatives, we talk about the positives. On whole, I would say if you were going to divide down the people who have different opinions, my opinion would probably represent maybe 30% of all expats that I've ever met. That's like the really positive China opinions. 10% above me, so like the China can do no wrong, China's perfect. That's like 40%. I would say that the majority of people, maybe 50%, of that chunk, the majority, they have a generally positive and understandable view of the way that China has progressed forward over the time that they've lived here. I'm saying you have to live, in order to be part of this group, you probably have to live in China for at least 6 months. You know, you can't get a view of China in a month. And there's people that have lived in China for 10 years that don't have an idea what China's like, because maybe they keep themselves locked in a circle of expats where they go to the bar and they go to the pub and then they come home and then they go to work and then they come home, go to the pub. You know, they keep themselves locked. But the people that do spread around and look around and again, and I would say have a pretty good view of China in the whole, I would say that the 10% have a super positive view. 30% have a view like mine that's like objectively positive. 50% have a positive view of China. All of these people, I'm minding you, go against the Winston and Matt and all of their narrative. Out of the remaining 10%, I'd say that 5% have a view that's China is not good, but I'm still living here for some reason because I have a job contract or something. I would say that maybe they're not as like full-throated negative as Winston is. I would say that Winston's opinion, if you were to take 1,000 people, 5% of those people, so like 50 people, would say that it's this CCP evil regime is behind all of this stuff. These are the people that have lived in China, that feel China. Their feet are on the ground. These guys, they haven't been in China for about a decade. So their opinions, even if they were valid a decade ago, they're outdated now. Even now, coming back to China after being gone for a year or two, I was in China 6 months ago, but like being, you know, at home here in Ningbo, I'm still seeing things that are improved upon, or things that I used to think were, you know, a little bit backwards, but are more straightforward today. China is always changing. And so the opinions that these guys hold were the minority when they lived here. Today, they're even less of a minority. So what I'm saying is take their opinions with the tiniest grain of salt that you can. I think maybe some people hate watch their content because they want to feel good about, you know, America, or they want to feel good about the way that things are going, but it makes them feel good. It's like watching unfortunately, what American politics has become. You know, you side yourself with the left or the right, and then you watch that channel, and that channel is going to make you feel good about yourself. But not all that stuff is going to be honest. It's certainly not going to be honest in projection to the other side, you know? So like if you're watching his content and you're looking to feel good about living in the West without having any comparisons to the way the rest of the world looks, then you're going to feel good about yourself. In fact, in this video, he talks about,
because right now it's not just the goal of the CCP to push that China is some better alternative.
Yeah.
It's actually more of a goal, from what I'm seeing, to push anti-America kind of videos and pieces of content that make Americans feel dissatisfied with life, almost to spread some sort of horrible dissent amongst the American public and exacerbate problems that maybe do exist, but exacerbate them to the levels that, you know, really upset people.
it's really a tell, because what he's saying is that the content that shows positive aspects to China, I think he talks about transportation, you know, infrastructure. Winston talks about like the beautiful lights on the building at night. He says that that's designed to make Americans feel bad about their current situation and feel bad about themselves. If you are an American and you watch a video about a train that can go from Los Angeles to New York very inexpensively at like 300 miles an hour, the equivalent of, because China, you know, has trains that can take you basically anywhere extremely fast. And what Winston and Matt are saying is, if you watch that video, China is trying to make you feel bad about yourself because America's train system is lacking. So what he's saying is, if people are telling the truth about China, then Americans are going to feel bad about themselves. And that is specifically the reason. The funny thing is that, like, I look out this window at China and I can see it growing. I can see those buildings that Winston says are just like Christmas lights hanging on the buildings. They're not Christmas lights. These are modern metropolis that are supporting businesses and supporting families and supporting communities. and the influx of tourism coming in here is supporting people, and all of those things are great. And to talk about those things would make, say, an American that's living in, even a big city in America, like Detroit or something, would make them feel inadequate because America doesn't have that sort of infrastructure there. And instead of having them say that this content can inspire people in America to think differently about maybe how urban development or transportation or the cost of healthcare or anything is done, instead they say, you shouldn't listen to it, don't believe your lying eyes. And I think that the majority of people that live here that are foreigners or even Chinese with a knowledge of the West would be able to explain to you that it's not fake. It's in fact real. I could talk about just this one video so much. As a matter of fact, there's a woman that is part of the stream. This woman talks about the video that she watched of a Chinese vlogger. I think his name was Mr. Lee.
Well, I think Shelley, you showed me recently what was that account, Mr. Lee, Teacher Lee, and why don't you tell the story about that woman? Because I thought this really explains well what's happening in China.
There's a guy who's a Chinese vlogger who goes around and it kind of interviews people. And he was just talking to this woman who was set up a shoe shine stall on the outskirts of Beijing. And then he was asking her, what she was doing, and she had her son with her who was 8 years old and blind. And then he was asking her like how much his medical treatment cost, and she was like, oh, 10,000 yuan a month. She was saying that to get the surgery that would really like help him would be like hundreds of thousands of yuan. She couldn't do it, and she and her mother were basically working as the delivery drivers. Like she's sleeping on the floor because it's like a studio essentially where the three of them are living.
And this woman is trying to raise money for the healthcare cost of her child, which was something like $1,000 a month. And so she was saying, in order to get my child the surgery that would be needed to remove a tumor, it would be prohibitively expensive. The story is one that you will hear all over the West, especially in America. Just go on Kickstarter and search all of the people searching and begging for money to help with some medical issue that they themselves or one of their family or friends have. But she's saying the shills out there who are promoting positive aspects of travel and things, these are normally travel vloggers, mind you, aren't shedding light on the story of this mother and her child who have medical problems, and that no one's going to be able to hear about the stories that she's describing.
This is kind of the part of China that people don't see from these, glitzy, Chongqing is the biggest city in the world, you've never heard of videos. You cannot see it unless, it's not going to be shown in that type of propaganda that they want to say that they've lifted people out of poverty, the whole thing.
It's not going to be shown. So she saw this video of a popular Chinese vlogger. A popular Chinese vlogger shared a story of an impoverished woman who was trying to pay the medical bills of her sick child. And her point was that how are people going to hear the stories? I think they could find it via the video that she's talking about of a popular Chinese vlogger. She pretty much roundabout outs herself. These people are all telling you that you can't hear these stories. Yet she is literally talking about a Chinese vlogger who shares those type of stories and sharing that story. Now, I don't claim to be a vlogger that shares those types of stories. I tend to share lifestyle vlogs and things that I see in places I interact with as I travel around the world. I'm sure if I bumped into that woman and I saw that, I would share that story. It might not present itself to me as easily as it did to that Chinese vlogger that she's talking about, but it's just funny how they say, you'll never hear about this stuff. You'll never hear about the real China unless you see this Chinese guy who's sharing the story of the real China on social media without getting blocked by the CCP maybe. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is I was not that guy. I did not call Winston and claim to him to apologize for all of my positive views of China, and saw the ridicule of of Winston towards China as the undeniable truth. I would argue that none of those stories are true. There's a chance that there's some angry people who came out of China and said thank you to Winston, but I would say that they are the exception to the rule, not the rule itself. And I think that people should listen to the rule itself instead of the exception to the rule. Anyways, thanks a lot. If you'd like me to cover more stories like this, leave a comment below. Did your attitudes change? I think probably there was a lot of people that sweated through COVID, especially in Shanghai. There were certainly some things to change your opinion of China about just being straightforward. And I could think of a number of scenarios that if that was your only experience of China, you might have some negative views of the country. But I would say more common would be people having positive views of the country. And I'm going to kind of like make sure to shed light on those kind of things, and especially draw comparisons between what these guys are saying, because I think what they're saying is extremely damaging. Anyways, like, subscribe, share. Thanks a lot. Make comments. This Nuance channel I want to grow. I'm going to be posting a lot as I'm here in China. There's a bunch of other things. Winston said that there's, basically people in China don't bake. And I thought that was funny because the street outside is full of bakeries and coffee shops. And it just goes to show how long he's been away. Maybe 15 years ago, China didn't have that much of a baking culture, but today it's prevalent and people love their breads. We'll talk more. Winston is not going to be happy with the direction I think this channel is going to take, because I think that he's had free reign to say basically whatever he wants, and nobody has really challenged him line by line, and I think that that's important. So, sorry, buddy. I might be back. So take it easy, guys. Jayo, and we'll see you in the next one. Add a little nuance to your opinion.